When I opened the front door that night, I knew something was off. It wasn't the light, though I noticed it first, a dim glow spilling from our living room where it should have been dark. It wasn't even the sound of laughter, soft, nervous and feminine, that carried through the hallway. It was the smell, that unfamiliar perfume, sugary and expensive, hanging in the air like a confession. My husband never liked strong scents. He once told me they gave him headaches, but there it was, cloying and heavy, wrapped around the faint scent of his cologne. My fingers tightened around the grocery bag I was carrying. The apples inside knocked softly against each other as I froze halfway in the doorway, listening. I should have called out his name. "That's what a wife does, right?" announces herself. But something inside me, call it instinct, or maybe the quiet wisdom that comes from years of holding your tongue, told me not to. So I didn't. I set the groceries down as silently as I could, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, and I walked toward the sound of that laughter. Before that night, I would have told you my marriage was fine, not perfect, just fine. We'd been married 14 years. We had a daughter in college, a modest house on the edge of town, a life that looked calm from the outside. Mornings smelled like coffee and buttered toast. Evenings were filled with the hum of the TV and the soft creak of the rocking chair I'd inherited from my mother. My husband, Daniel, worked as a regional sales manager for a logistics company. Long hours, lots of travel. He'd leave early, kiss me on the forehead and come home late. Sometimes tired, sometimes irritable, but always with that same practiced smile. I ran a small flower shop downtown. Petals Grace. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. On good days, I'd bring home leftover blooms and make little vases for the kitchen. Daniel used to tease me for it, said I was trying to turn the house into a garden. We weren't a couple that fought often. Maybe that was part of the problem. Somewhere between bills and work and raising a child, our silences became longer than our conversations. But still, I thought we were okay, until that night. The sound came clearer as I stepped closer to the living room. I heard Daniel's voice, low, playful in a way I hadn't heard in years. And hers. A woman's laugh, high and breathy, followed by the unmistakable sound of a wine glass being set on the table. My chest tightened. I edged forward and peered around the corner. There she was, sitting on my sofa, legs crossed, hair spilling over one shoulder. She was younger than me by at least 10 years, dressed in a short, glittering dress that caught the light every time she moved. And there was Daniel, sitting too close, his hand resting on her thigh like it belonged there. He said something that made her laugh again, and then he leaned in. I didn't need to see more. I stepped back before they could notice me, my hands trembling. I could feel my pulse in my throat, a painful, steady thud. There's a moment when betrayal hits, a split second where everything slows down. You think of every memory, every dinner, every whispered, "I love you," and they all rearrange themselves into lies. I wanted to burst into the room, scream, throw something, do something. But I didn't. I stood in the hallway, gripping the edge of the wall, forcing myself to breathe. My mind was racing, half denial, half fury. But beneath it all was something colder. Clarity. He didn't know I was home early. He didn't know I was standing there. And suddenly I realized that was my advantage. So I left. Quietly. I walked back to the front door, picked up the grocery bag, and slipped out before they could notice. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the porch light that I had left on that morning, never imagining what it would illuminate that night. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He came into the kitchen wearing his usual crisp shirt and cologne, kissed me on the cheek and said, "Morning, honey." Honey. I looked up from the sink where I was rinsing the coffee pot and forced a small smile. "Morning." He didn't notice my hands were shaking. He poured himself coffee, scrolled through his phone, and mentioned something about a late meeting that evening. I listened. I nodded. I didn't say I already knew, because now I had a plan. The thing about betrayal is, it strips you of your illusion, but it also gives you power. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I decided to wait, to observe. For a week, I said nothing. I watched his patterns: late nights, sudden work trips, secretive phone calls. He'd leave the room when his phone buzzed. He'd take extra care getting dressed. Once he even asked if I thought his new shirt made him look younger. I smiled and said yes. Inside, I was memorizing every detail. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew she drove a small silver car with a dent on the left bumper because I saw it parked 2 streets over one evening when I decided to forget something at home and drive back. She was waiting in it, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. I parked a little further away and watched as Daniel came out, looking over his shoulder before getting in beside her. I sat there, my knuckles white around the steering wheel, watching my husband of 14 years drive off with another woman. That was the moment the anger turned into something else. Resolve. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to make them see what they'd done. And the best part, they'd do it to themselves. That Friday, we had our usual dinner with friends, other couples we'd known for years. Daniel suggested we host it at our house. Perfect. He didn't know that I'd already invited one extra guest. The silver car with the dent in the bumper. When Friday came, I felt unnervingly calm. I remember standing in front of the mirror, pinning my hair back the way Daniel always liked, loose at the sides, simple. My reflection looked almost detached, like I was watching another woman prepare for a performance she'd rehearsed her whole life. Downstairs, the house smelled of rosemary chicken and white wine. The table was set with our wedding china, the set we'd only bring out on special occasions. I could hear Daniel humming in the kitchen, the same tune he always hummed when he was proud of himself. It's strange how betrayal makes you notice the smallest details. The way someone's footsteps sound on tile, the exact rhythm of their laugh. All those tiny things that used to be comforting suddenly turn foreign. At around 7, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and called, "I'll get it." Daniel's voice came from behind me. "Who's that? Everyone's supposed to come at 7:30. I didn't answer. I opened the door, and there she was. The woman from the silver car. The one who'd been in my living room sitting where I sit, laughing with my husband. Her name, I'd learned, was Erica. I'd found her name the same way every betrayed woman eventually does, by looking through what we're told never to touch. His phone. There were messages, dozens of them. Some hidden in an app I didn't even know existed. She called him D, he called her sweetheart. And when I saw the address she sent him, our address, I knew exactly who she was. So, I invited her. The look on her face when she saw me standing there, calm, polite, smiling, was almost worth every sleepless night. "Oh," she stammered, blinking. "Hi. Maybe I got the wrong—" "No, Erica," I said softly. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." She froze, eyes darting past me, and I watched her realize Daniel was home. Her lipstick was a deep red, her perfume that same cloying sweetness that still clung to my living room curtains. I could almost feel her panic, like the air itself had thickened. Before she could respond, I stepped aside. "Come in." Her heels clicked on the wooden floor as she stepped past me. Daniel appeared in the hallway holding a glass of wine. The moment he saw her, the glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the floor. "Erica," he croaked. The silence that followed could have swallowed the whole house. I smiled gently. "Oh, good, you two do know each other." 10 minutes later, our guests started to arrive, 4 of our closest couple friends. They greeted us cheerfully, unaware of the storm brewing under the surface. Daniel tried to usher Erica out before they saw her, but I was faster. "Oh, everyone," I said brightly, clapping my hands once. "This is Erica. She's a friend of Daniel's from work. She's joining us for dinner." The word friend hung in the air like a spark before lightning. Our friends exchanged quick, curious glances. Daniel's face had gone pale. Erica looked like she wanted to disappear. I kept smiling. The dinner began awkwardly. Small talk, clinking glasses, the usual polite laughter. But tension has a smell, and everyone could sense it. Daniel barely touched his food. His hand trembled each time he reached for his glass. At one point, one of our friends, Jessica, looked at me and said, "So, how long have you two known each other, Erica?" Erica's fork froze mid-air. She glanced at Daniel, then at me, then managed a shaky smile. "Oh, not very long. Just through work." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Oh? I thought you said earlier that you'd been to our house before." Her eyes widened. Well, I mean..." The table fell silent. Daniel muttered, "Maya, that's enough." "No, please," I interrupted softly, my voice steady. "I'm just curious. She seemed so comfortable last time she was here, almost like she lived here." A pin could have dropped. One of our guests coughed awkwardly. Another took a sip of water, pretending not to notice the way Daniel's jaw tightened. Then, Erica stood abruptly, muttering, "I should go." I looked up at her with that same calm smile I'd practiced in the mirror. "Oh, don't leave on my account. You were so comfortable last time." She hesitated, then bolted for the door. Daniel stood, running after her. "Erica, wait!" But by then, the damage was done. Our friends sat in stunned silence as the front door slammed shut. I looked down at my plate, cut a piece of chicken, and said quietly, "I suppose that's the end of dinner." Later, when everyone had left, Daniel returned home alone. He walked into the living room, face ashen, shoulders slumped. "Maya," he started, voice hoarse, "that was cruel." I looked up from the couch. "Was it?" He rubbed his temples. "You humiliated me." I let out a soft, humorless laugh. "No, Daniel, you did that all by yourself." He sat down across from me, head in his hands. "I made a mistake, okay? It's over. It didn't mean anything." I studied him for a long moment. "Then why did you bring her here? To our home?" He didn't answer. The clock ticked softly between us. After a while I said, "Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't catching you. It was realizing how easily you looked at me every morning and lied." He swallowed hard. "Maya, please. I'll do anything. Just don't leave." I stood. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "But you are." He looked up, stunned. "What?" "You'll stay at your brother's for a while. I need space. I need to breathe without your perfume and her laughter in these walls." "Maya, don't." My voice cracked for the first time. "Don't call me that like it still means something." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, stood, and left. When the door shut behind him, I sat back on the couch, surrounded by silence. the kind of silence that hums with both grief and relief, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into Facebook, and did something I never thought I'd do. I changed my relationship status to separated. No explanation, no drama. Just one word. It didn't take long for people to notice. Comments poured in, messages from friends, whispers circulating quietly through our social circle. Daniel's perfect image, the devoted husband, the respectable professional, began to crumble without me having to lift a finger. I didn't need to tell the world what he'd done. The truth had already walked itself into my house, wearing red lipstick and guilt. The next few weeks felt strange, quiet, suspended, like I was living inside a memory that hadn't decided whether to fade or haunt me. Daniel moved out the next morning. He packed a single duffel bag, avoided eye contact, and mumbled something about staying with his brother until things cooled down. He left his wedding ring on the counter. It made a soft metallic sound when it touched the granite, small but final. I stood there staring at it for a long time. You'd think a ring that had meant love and promises and forever would make a louder sound when it hit the counter. But no, it just lay there, dull and silent. I didn't pick it up. The days that followed moved in slow motion. I'd wake up, make coffee, go to the shop. I'd smile at customers, wrap flowers in brown paper, listen to the snip of scissors. On the outside, nothing had changed, but every sound seemed louder now. The bell on the shop door, the hum of the refrigerator, the chirp of my phone whenever someone texted to ask, "Are you okay?" I'd type the same thing every time. "I'm fine." I wasn't, but pretending was easier than explaining. What would I even say? That I caught my husband cheating in our living room and invited his mistress to dinner? That I smiled through it all just to watch them crumble? It sounded like something out of a movie, not the quiet, ordinary life of a woman who arranged lilies and daisies for weddings and funerals. But in those quiet hours after the shop closed, I'd sit behind the counter, surrounded by the scent of roses and wet stems, and replay everything in my head. Every word, every look, every lie I hadn't noticed before. It was around the third week that I started getting calls from mutual friends. "Maya," one of them said cautiously, "we saw Daniel at the club last night. With her." Another time, "He's saying it was just a misunderstanding, that you overreacted." I'd just hum, say something polite and change the subject, because by then I understood something. People like Daniel don't destroy themselves all at once. They unravel slowly, in public, trying to rewrite the story as they go. And the less I said, the louder the truth became. One Saturday afternoon, I was closing up the shop when I saw Erica standing across the street. For a second, I thought I was imagining it, that maybe guilt or curiosity had conjured her up. But no, it was her. Same long hair, same oversized sunglasses. Only this time she looked smaller. She hesitated before crossing the street, and when she finally reached me, she looked down instead of at me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I studied her for a moment, unsure if I wanted to hear her voice again, but there was something brittle in her posture. Not arrogance, not defiance, just shame. I nodded toward the bench outside the shop. 5 minutes. We sat. The sun was beginning to set, painting the street in that tired, honey-coloured light that makes everything look softer than it really is. "I didn't know," she started. "At first, he told me he was separated, that you two barely spoke." I said nothing. She wrung her hands. By the time I realised, it was too late. And when I saw you that night, she swallowed hard. I've never felt smaller. Her voice trembled. I know you probably hate me. I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head slowly. I don't hate you, Erica. I pity you. She blinked. Because someday, if you're not careful, I continued softly, someone will make you feel what I felt, and you'll understand how deep betrayal cuts. You'll understand that love without honesty isn't love at all. Her eyes filled with tears. He told me he loved me. I smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, but recognition. He told me the same thing, every morning for 14 years. She nodded slowly, stood up and whispered, I'm sorry. And for the first time, I believed her. She walked away, her heels clicking down the sidewalk until the sound disappeared into the hum of traffic. That night, Daniel showed up at the house. I heard the knock while I was folding laundry, that slow, deliberate rhythm that only he used. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He looked deflated. His hair was unkempt, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. We need to talk, he said. I crossed my arms. About what? You made your choice. I made a mistake, he said quickly. She's gone. She left town. I want to fix this, Maya. Fix this, I repeated, the words sharp on my tongue. Daniel, this isn't a broken vase you can glue back together. You burned down the whole house. He flinched. I don't expect forgiveness. I can't sleep. I can't eat. You don't understand what it's like to lose. Don't, I said quietly. Don't make yourself the victim in a story you wrote. He fell silent. I took a breath. I spent years making this house a home. You invited someone else into it. You shattered every bit of safety I had. And you think an apology fixes that? His voice broke. I just want you back. For a long moment I just looked at him, the man I once loved, the man who still wore the same watch I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. And then I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. There was no malice left in me, only emptiness. I can't go back, I said softly, even if I wanted to. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And I think he finally understood that the woman standing before him wasn't waiting for him anymore. He nodded once, tears gathering in his eyes. I'll sign whatever you want. I whispered, thank you, and closed the door. On the other side, I heard him whisper my name once like a prayer no one would answer. That night I took his ring from the counter and dropped it into a small glass bowl I kept by the window. The sound it made, that dull little clink, was softer than before, because this time it didn't hurt. It just felt done. A month later, the divorce papers were filed. People kept asking if I was okay, and for the first time, I could answer honestly. Yes, I'd say, I am. Because revenge wasn't about ruining his life. It was about reclaiming mine. And that, in the quietest way possible, was exactly what I'd done. The first morning after signing the divorce papers, I woke up to sunlight spilling across the bed. My bed. There was no second toothbrush by the sink anymore, no rumpled shirt draped across the chair, no sound of Daniel humming in the kitchen. The house felt emptier than it had ever been. Yet somehow, lighter too. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I owed someone an explanation. I made coffee, black, the way I liked it, not the way he preferred. I sat by the window, letting the warmth of the cup seep into my palms. Outside, the world was still going on. Neighbours watering plants, kids running for the bus, the newspaper boy cycling down the lane. everything was the same. Only I wasn't. Healing is a strange thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It comes in whispers. It's the first time you make dinner without setting the table for two. It's the moment you laugh at a movie again, realizing the sound came from you. It's finding peace in silence that used to feel unbearable. But it's also messy. There were nights when the memories crept in. The look on his face when he said her name, the scent of her perfume lingering on his shirt. Some nights I cried, not because I missed him, but because I mourned the version of me who believed him. That woman, the one who thought love was forever, who believed in the sanctity of vows, she deserved better than lies. And now, I was learning to become someone new. My friends noticed the change first. "You seem calm," Priya said one afternoon at the shop. We were arranging sunflowers for a wedding order, the stems wet and fragrant in our hands. "I am," I said, surprised at how true it felt. It's like I finally stopped waiting for the storm to pass. I just stepped out of it. She smiled softly. "That's power, Maya. Quiet power." I thought about that all day. Quiet power. It wasn't about shouting or punishing or proving. It was about knowing that I had survived what should have broken me and still managed to smile. A few weeks later, word began to spread, as it always does in small circles. People whispered that Daniel's business was struggling, that Erica had left town for good, taking with her the illusion of his new beginning. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, just closure. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to exist. Still, there was one moment that surprised me. One evening, I received an invitation, a charity gala organised by one of our old friends. My first instinct was to decline. I hadn't seen most of them since that night. But something in me wanted to go. Not to prove anything, but to show up as the woman I had become. So I wore a simple navy dress, pulled my hair into a low bun, and walked into that ballroom with my head high. The moment I entered, conversations dimmed. I could feel eyes on me, curious, measuring, a little guilty. Daniel was there too, standing near the bar, looking smaller than I remembered. He caught sight of me, and for a second our eyes met. There was no anger in his face, only regret. He raised his glass slightly, a silent gesture, maybe apology. I gave a faint nod and turned away. That was all that needed to be said. Later that night, as I stood by the balcony overlooking the city lights, one of our old friends, Rohan, approached me. "You handled everything with grace," he said quietly. I smiled. "I just told the truth." He nodded. Most people would have exploded, gone public, made a scene. "Anger burns fast," I said softly. "Grace lasts longer." He looked at me thoughtfully. "You're stronger than you look, Maya." Maybe. But it wasn't about strength anymore. It was about peace. That kind that comes when you stop fighting for someone who stopped choosing you. When I got home that night, I sat in the garden. The one Daniel used to ignore, but I'd always loved. The jasmine vines were in bloom, filling the air with that familiar sweetness that used to remind me of summer evenings, when everything still felt simple. I closed my eyes and let the night settle around me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I whispered to myself, not out loud, but from somewhere deep inside, "I forgive you." Not for him, for me. Because carrying resentment only kept me tied to him, to what he did. And I was done being bound to his mistakes. The next morning, I wrote something in my journal. a letter I would never send. It said, "Daniel, you taught me that love without respect is just dependency. You taught me that silence can be the loudest revenge. And you taught me that sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one said with peace. Thank you for breaking what needed to be rebuilt." I folded the paper and tucked it away. It wasn't bitterness that filled me. It was gratitude. Strange, quiet gratitude for having been forced to rediscover myself. Months later, I took a small trip to the coast. I walked along the shoreline, barefoot, the waves brushing against my ankles. The horizon stretched endlessly, calm, vast, forgiving. I realized then that healing doesn't erase what happened. It just softens the edges until you can hold the memory without bleeding. I thought of the woman I was when this began, naive, trusting, afraid of confrontation. And the woman I was now, calm, certain, and finally, free. When I got home from that trip, I rearranged the house, moved the couch, painted the living room, changed the curtains. It wasn't just redecorating, it was reclaiming space. Every corner that once held his presence now reflected mine. And one evening, as I lit a candle by the window, the same bowl with his ring caught the light. I picked it up one last time, walked to the backyard, and buried it beneath the jasmine bush. A fitting place for endings and new beginnings. Then, I stood there for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the night, and it struck me. Revenge hadn't been the dinner I served that night, or the silence that followed. Revenge was living well, peacefully, fully, without ever needing to raise my voice. When I look back now, I realize that night didn't break me. It revealed me. Sometimes life does that. It takes what you think you can't live without and quietly removes it from your hands, just to show you that you can still stand on your own. I used to think revenge had to be loud, that it needed fire and fury to make its point. But I learned that the quiet kind is stronger, the kind that doesn't need to shout or destroy because it knows the truth will do that on its own. Daniel and Erica were only chapters in a much bigger story. A story I'm still writing, one where the main character finally learned that peace is its own form of justice. Sometimes the best revenge isn't exposing someone. It's letting them live with what they did, while you move forward, lighter, wiser, free. I used to pray that one day he'd regret losing me. Now I just hope he heals enough to never hurt anyone the way he hurt me. That's growth. That's freedom. So if you're listening to this and you've been betrayed by a lover, a friend, or even family, I want you to know this. You don't need to destroy them to reclaim yourself. You just need to stop letting them take space in your story. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It's knowing you can start again and still be whole. When I buried that ring under the jasmine bush, I wasn't saying goodbye to him. I was saying hello to myself. And that, my friends, was the sweetest revenge I never planned. Would you have done what I did? Would you have stayed silent or confronted him that night? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. And if my story touched you, remember to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes sharing our pain is how we turn it into peace.